You want us to give the do's and don'ts at the same time, Anton? Okay, sorry. Okay, great. Hi, no worries. Hi, everyone. I'm Richard. I am the local director running the Founder Institute Accelerator in London. I've been doing that for the last 7-8 years. We've graduated hundreds of tech startups, many who have gone on to get funding. We've helped them get investor ready, if we use that term. Done lots of other things, currently working with universities to also launch accelerators within their master's degrees. There's 3 or 4 that we've just started working with, and we've got more in the pipeline. I advise several founders officially on their board as an advisor. That's a little bit about me. Thank you.
Hi there, I'm Dan Barron. I'm Chief Executive of Ideas Crucible. I'm a venture capitalist. I have been working with in the tech startup space for about more decades than I admit. I've had 4 startups that I've founded, exited 2, raised for 3, exited 2. I'm on the board of a VC, and I run a company raising investment for fintechs and deep techs, typically seed to series A+ and B. A lot of AI, cyber, medtech, healthcare, university spin-outs at the end of the day.
Right, I just realized we need to unmute Tommy. Where is Tommy? Bear with me, please, lovely people. Where are you, Tommy? Ah, that is not good. Okay, so Tommy's left the room. Can the others see Tommy, or is it just me that... Oh, here we go. Found you, yep. Right. Mr. Breen, can you hear us? Are you able to talk now?
Yeah.
Good man.
Hi everyone, my name is Tommy Breen and I'm a senior advisor at the Growth Stage. So we are a capital raising platform for tech businesses. And as our very on the nose name gives away, we work primarily with growth stage businesses. So typically businesses that are looking to raise a Series B round or later. So in numerical terms, call it roughly, a $15 to $20 million raise, right up into, much larger rounds, even into the hundreds of millions of dollars at times. And then outside of that, I actually work with Rich as well as a mentor at Founder Institute. So do quite a lot of work with early stage startups right at ideation stage until their MVP launch. So trying to guide them through that process. So I have a lot of experience working with early stage businesses as well.
Super duper. Thank you very much to all 3 of you gentlemen. Well, you've heard them, people. We've got 3 brilliant fundraising experts with us today. The idea is quite simple. If you're tuning in via the live streams, you need to either click on the links there or simply go to startuptoscaleup.club. Look for today's session, which is Startup Fundraising Q&A 135. Click join, quick registration. That gets you a link to your email and you can join us through that link. And if you want to ask our panel, then you join us on Microsoft Teams. You type your question in the chat, we'll give you the mic, and then the floor is yours. We're here to help you with any questions you may have on your fundraising journey, whether you want to know how and when is the right time to fundraise, who should you go after, is it an angel, is it a VC, perhaps how much you need to ask for, how do you go about finding the right investor, maybe how do you prepare your pitch deck, or even how do you actually do a pitch, maybe prepare your data room and all that jazz. This is the place to be, but we're only going to be here for the next 48 minutes. So if you do have questions that you want to ask us today, just remember there are no wrong questions and there's no need to be shy, but you need to hurry. Now, if your questions are not on fundraising, then you can save them for the other events we run. So we're currently doing 6 regular events, Monday's talent, Tuesday's product and tech, Wednesday's growth, Thursday's fundraising, second Friday of the month is UK Startup Law, and third Friday of the month is UK Startup Finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time, and you can RSVP to any of them by our site, startuptoscaleup.club. And actually, when you're there, you might want to join our WhatsApp community. At the top and bottom of that site, you'll see a WhatsApp icon. and it's a few groups with founders, investors, and operators. And now, as you get ready to ask your questions, maybe we can ask our panelists, what are your biggest do's and don'ts when it comes to early stage fundraising, gentlemen? Let's start with Tommy, then Dan, then Richard, please.
Yeah, I think the most important thing for early stage businesses when they're thinking about fundraising is understanding if your business venture backable, as they say. So often for a lot of founders when they're starting up, they look at having a tech startup and they think you need to go and raise venture capital. It's not necessarily always true. But even if you do need to raise capital, venture capital is not necessarily the right avenue. So venture backable business, your business needs to be in a space where there's a market opportunity for it to grow to be worth, probably $1 billion is what a lot of venture capital funds want to see, having that unicorn potential, but certainly at least into the hundreds of millions. And if you're not in a space that it's got that growth potential, it doesn't mean you're not going to have a big successful business, but it's going to be difficult for venture funds to invest in that. There's lots of reasons for that, and the dynamics of how their investment portfolios work and the dynamics of portfolio management and venture capital, which I won't get into. But you really need to go away and understand the market opportunity you're in. Is there really scope for the business and the idea that you have, if it's successful, to be worth billions? So can you get it to be raising or generating, hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue annually in a few years, in 5 to 10 years? If that's not there, then it's not venture backable probably, and you'll be wasting your time going after venture investors. And fundraising takes a lot of time. It'll be really painful for your business if you spend time going after investors that are never going to back you. That's not to say there's not other investors. There are angels that will back businesses that can be worth tens of millions. They don't really need to see necessarily the unicorn scale, but it is something to think about. And I won't drill into the point too much more, but if you have any more questions on it, jump in and ask, and I can explain in more detail. But I'll pass over to someone else to give some of their thoughts.
Thanks, Tommy. Yes, Dan.
Yeah, great advice by Tommy there. I mean, I guess the answers you'll hear from many venture capitalists, which I concur with, is it's all about the preparation and planning for the raise. Don't go out there till you're ready. Put the time and effort in. And also with early stage, the good advice, which is worth saying, it's about you, likable, coachable, someone that you can get on with, someone who can build a team. But maybe just a piece of advice that I maybe don't give enough, particularly with early stage startups who are just starting out, starting the startup as well as starting the raise, is you need to be super resilient, and you need to train yourself to have that body armor. Having a startup is a marathon. You are going to get pushbacks. You're going to get people taunting you. You're going to get people pushing back, challenging you, and it will feel personal at times. You've got to stick at it at the end of the day. I think it was something like, was it McDonnell Douglas or one of those? They had their jet engine got pushed back 136 times before it was accepted, for instance. You've really got to be resilient, but equally so, to minimize the chances you're going to get pushbacks. Plan, and stay focused at the end of the day. I'll hand over now.
I think so. Thank you, Dan. So a couple of my points I had been touched on, but look, I think I will go down the track of the do is to don't skip customer research. Time and time again, we're constantly seeing founders who may have asked, colleagues, friends, there's some relationship to the individual they're researching with, but blanket research to unknown potential customers that have no bias to the founders, co-founder or founder, detailed customer research, because we see this step constantly being either not done really well or not done at all, surprisingly, and how much we see founders building products, before that deep customer research is done. So don't skip it and do it. So I'll put them both in the do and the don't. How's that sound?
Fair enough. That's some good points there from all three of you. Thank you very much for that. Okay, so hi team, we're raising a pre-seed round of 2 million for UDGUM. This is a pitch deck. Okay. Tell you what, I'm gonna give you the mic, and then maybe you can tell us what your business is for the investors here, and you can ask some advice. How would you best go about raising Pranav? Let me give you the mic. Are you audible? Can you hear us, Pranav?
Yeah. Hello. Hello,
You
team.
can.
So,
Hi.
yeah.
Welcome to our Q&As again, Pranav. Please introduce yourself for those that don't know you, and then fire away with your question in terms of, you know, whatever help you think you may or advice you may need in how to go about raising. And for the others, if you do have any questions on fundraising, please type them in the chat like Pranav has if you want to be given the mic. Go ahead, Pranav.
Yeah. So I am Pranav Joshi, the founder and CEO at UDGUM. So we are creating the AI-powered no cheat or no fraud leadership hiring platform where we would be associated with these freelance interviewers, which would be from the top leading giant of the industry that we would be hiring for the client. Like suppose we are hiring for a director of technology role for the client, then both the core skill interviewer and the soft skill interviewer would be from FANG, like Google, etc. If it is a consulting role, then McKinsey, etc. And we are trying to solve the biggest problem in leadership hiring, as it takes way much more time as compared to a normal or a junior role hiring. So we would try to close the roles within weeks and not months. Apart from that, we would be developing an all-in-one interviewing ecosystem, so the interviewer also doesn't have to use various tools to check the questions they must ask the candidates. And in the same platform, the candidates can use the whiteboard to, like code if it is a tech role and do all the other activities if it is a business role. And the reports would get generated once the interview is generated, just after some clicks of the, like interviewer. So this is all about outcome.
Okay, thank you very much for that, Pranav. Pranav, can you tell us how much do you need to raise and why?
So at the current moment, we are, like looking forward to raise somewhere around 1 to 2 million USD to scale, to first of all build our platform, and we are looking forward to get the initial traction of the, like customers. We would focus on a freemium model. So yeah, that's why we need around 1 to 2 million USD and go in the market and establish ourselves.
Okay, so this the 1 to 2 million is not to build the platform, or because you mentioned it first and then you said this is
Yeah,
to grow.
it is.
So which
It
is
is
it
to
a
build the
mixture?
platform as well. Yeah, it is a mixture. So we are raising the pre-seed round, and my co-founder is from Google. He's a SD3 at Google. So yeah, we are looking forward to, like raise this round of 1 to 2 million USD.
And how did you come up with that number, Pranav?
So basically, we came up with that number. So regarding the tech that we would be, like going forward, all the tools and the things that we would need for the tech team, we would have to pay the salaries apart from the CTO. And moving forward, like I told, for the initial customers, we would use the freemium model so that like we can get the traction, and they must like know what is it.
When you say freemium model, what do you mean by that, Pranav?
By the freemium model, we actually mean that since we are, like we would be developing this AI-powered no-cheat platform, so we would give it to our initial customers to use the entire SaaS interviewing platform. So it would be somewhere like suppose Zoom, Teams, or Google Meet. It is just a video call platform, but that platform would be a all-in platform related to interviewing, and which would benefit the clients, whether in the form that no candidates could cheat, and we would detect if any as such fraudulent practices would be done. And apart from that, for the initial customers, we would like provide our freelance interviewers as well, which would vet the candidates, and this would be the industry leading experts from the top of the global giants. So we would pay them from our cut, and the customer doesn't have to pay that. So yeah, we would focus, although we would focus on the startups that at least have raised Series A, but yeah, that is to get the early traction.
I hear. Okay, I'll pass it on to the experts, the fundraising experts, but a couple of things quickly, and then you can go on to them. You joined yesterday in the growth room, and as somebody who has had numerous businesses in recruitment or some form of it, and also still works in a way in recruitment / talent acquisition, I really think you should focus on the software side of it rather than the interviewers. And number two, I really think you shouldn't go to start with. You shouldn't go to startups, but you should go to medium size or even larger businesses in terms of getting that traction of work. And as far as the investment, I would try and be clearer in terms of what the money is for and how long it will last you. But let's see what our panel has got to say. So this time we will start with Dan, then Tommy, then Richard, please.
Okay. Recruitment tech, by the way, in my view, is one of the hardest areas to penetrate. It's an extremely very busy area for technology. There's a lot of players in it, a lot of young startups who frankly really poor. They think it's very straightforward to enter, and a lot of them are basing it old school techniques like the CV, which to me is one of the most outdated concepts. And yet the biggest disruptor in the space actually threw away the CV, and that's LinkedIn at the end of the day. I think you really need to be clear where you're positioning yourself. Startups and executives don't typically sit in the same bucket at the end of the day. Executive recruitment is extremely hard. It's about preparing for the role, the job, sourcing the role, screening the role, selecting, hiring, onboarding, orienteering, not just finding talent, but finding talent that mixes with the executive execs. So it's often about chemistry as well that has to go into it. And it takes, for instance, months and months at the end of the day. And it's often still you end up throwing out all the candidates once you're shortlisted, because it just has to work for an exec role. And you might even descend at the end of it. The best thing is an interim role. So you really need to figure out, it's to try and shorten something down from what is typically a 3-month process for an exec role. Great if you can do it, but a lot of it is how you're going to measure those soft skills at the end of the day. I think my questions, I have more questions than answers, I fear here, comes back to one of the previous panelists that was saying you've really got to understand the customer. So you've got to speak to the headhunters out there, the recruitment agencies, understand what are the bottlenecks. At the moment, it is an extremely manual process, and people keep going back to manual because there's a massive graveyard of tech startups that have tried to automate this and realize understanding, meeting those candidates, sourcing those candidates globally around the road for a FTSE or NASDAQ company requires a massive team of scouts to be able to literally go through all those candidate resumes at the end of the day, those job boards, really meet these candidates and see what their eyes are, understand what they are, understand the pay scales that they're looking for, understand the benefits and the medical packages they're wanting, the pensions they're going to be getting, not to mention all the paperwork that has to go down on the back of it, form letters, offer letters, training. It is a really complex process. And I think you might want to start by mapping out the existing process and then figuring out, if, as a young startup, how can you disrupt that basically and disintermediate it.
Thanks, Dan. Sure.
Anton, you're on mute.
I am. Tommy.
Happy someone else to jump in.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I was hoping Tommy,
Okay.
and then Richard, please.
Yeah, some really good stuff there covered by Dan, so I don't want to spend too much more time going through this, but just looking at the deck that you've sent, and you have a technical co-founder, a CTO. So at this stage, I don't think that you really need $2 million to build an MVP. I'm sure a coder from Google should be able to help you build a pretty basic version of the platform that at least you've like a raw MVP that you can use to start gaining a bit of traction or at least demo to people. So, just starting you know, I don't know what testing you've done or traction you have, but starting at the point that you need to raise $2 million to build a platform is very, very difficult. And, you know, I think that given that you have an actual software engineer in the founding team, you should be able to build a basic version, and using coding agents as well should really speed that up. It doesn't have to be perfect. It doesn't have to have AI in the first version. AI is not, you know, this is an AI first business. It's a business that's going to utilize AI, so that can be something that can be added in after MVP. But, you know, I would just focus on not trying to get $2 million because it's going to be very difficult. I'd focus on, you know, being scrappy and just thinking, how can we get a good MVP out that we can test? It doesn't have to be perfect. You know, MVPs are, and you shouldn't waste too much time trying to get them perfect. So I just really focus more on trying to get your first version of the product, some sort of prototype that you can test and at least demonstrate to people out there, rather than worrying too much about raising $2 million right now.
Thanks, Tommy.
Hi, Pranav. Thanks for sending your deck. Look, I concur with what's being said first. And for me, this sort of really seems a little subjective what you're doing here. Like what you've heard already is, you know, it's a very competitive market. We have a load of founders coming into this space trying to disrupt it. I wish someone would disrupt it, because we all know it's not a tremendous process. But you're so, like, if I read through this deck and didn't have you on the phone here, it's so high level. You know, the problems in leadership hiring on your third slide, I think it's slow hiring cycles. But I mean, how slow? You quote up to 3 or 4 months, but really, is it? You mean for an executive role, is that a problem? I actually wouldn't have thought 3 or 4 months was a problem. So I'm not really getting it. You talk about fraud and mismatch. Yeah, we all know that. Well, I have friends and colleagues in this space, and you know they constantly talk about the AI that they're adapting to shortcut the process so they can get to the right candidate first. You're not sort of showing us here what's different about you. We know these problems exist, but again, I just reiterate, they're just so high level. It doesn't, I think it was Dan that just said, you know, lay out the current process and tell us how you're going to fix specific areas of that process with your tech. Okay, that's something that I would suggest to you. On the front, you talk about the size of the market, and you know you've got a TAM there worth 50 odd billion. Then your projections are 58. Is that the projected TAM to move to that number, or your projections? It's a little confusing for me.
No,
I'm assuming
that's the projection from the, you know, like, researchers, that in 2025 it will move to somewhere around 50.
it'll be the value of the market. The value of the market, correct?
Yeah, the total addressable market, and the market is which, the amount that is being paid to the recruitment agencies to hire a leadership role.
Yeah. Okay. Look, you know, I just think, you know, just to sort of carry what's been said to you already, you know, this is a busy space. Everybody's adapting, bringing in AI to make this process easier and more accurate. What are you going to do that's different to these others? I think that's a real strong message here. And to sort of say, hey, I want to grab 2 million off an investor and, you know, build, and you know, it starts to put up amber to red flags for me, which is something I mentioned on the outset in my do's and don'ts. You know, we see founders running along and building something that they think will be better, but you know, how much testing have you done? And what I'd love to know is, you know, I would love to see that process that was asked of you. Here's exactly what happens in terms of a hiring process, and here are the stages that we can improve on using this tech, using AI, using whatever. Okay, so be a bit more specific and not so subjective and high, sort of pie in the sky type comments, because at the moment, asking for such a big ask pre-seed, because it is one of the highest I've seen in a while, and just be sitting up at this high cloudy level just doesn't sit right with me. So I would tighten it up.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Yeah,
Pranav,
sure,
in
thank
my experience, Pranav, unless you've got a rich auntie or uncle that is going to write a check for you, or unless you have got some successful exits under your belts, raising anything like that, and especially for this kind of business, actually not 1 or 2 mil, even a few 100,000 is next to impossible at this stage. What I would do if I were you, I would find a way to build an MVP, just focus on one simple thing that it can do. Probably what you want to do with this could easily be done with a few APIs on some other language models, and you could try your hypothesis. Once you've done that, then maybe go after some accelerators that will help you build this, maybe give you a bit of money just to kind of keep the lights on until the next stage. But going for 1 or 2 mil, I mean, if you do, please do come back and tell us, because I would love to learn how you did it. But from what I can see in the market, it's just quite unrealistic. So my advice is focus on building this and getting it out to some people instead. I hope you found it helpful, although it may not be what you wanted to hear, Pranav.
absolutely. No, I believe that it is very much helpful. So thank you so much for that.
Very welcome and best of luck, and I hope it goes well. And please do come back and join us again, because I'd love to hear on your progress and how things are going. All right, so somebody said, sorry, got distracted for a bit. I sent it, their pitch deck here to be discussed. Okay. Tim, I'm not sure what you mean in terms of selling your pitch deck, but if you have any questions, you or anybody, by the way, so let me just reset the conversation. This is Startup Fundraising Q&A. We're here to help startups with whatever questions you have on fundraising for your startup business. We are only going to be here for the next 25 minutes. So if you do have any questions that you want to ask, you want to do it now. Those questions can be on anything from how to reach out to investors, how to do your pitch deck, how to prepare for data room, valuations, equity, due diligence, grants, angel investors, VC, crowdfunding, exits, and all that jazz. There are no wrong questions, and there's no need to be shy. It's a learning curve for us all. Now, if you're tuning in via our live streams, whether that's LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, please be aware that unfortunately we are unable to monitor your questions there live. So you'll need to join us here on Microsoft Teams. You can do that either via the links that I've posted on those live streams, or simply go to our website, startuptoscaleup.club. Look for today's session, which is Startup Fundraising Q&A 135. Click join. It's a quick registration. That will then get you an email with a link to your email, basically. And then you can join us via that. And that's when you can then type your question in the chat here, and I'll give you the mic and you can ask our team. On the other hand, if your questions are on other matters, please save them for the other events we run. Mondays, it's talent. Tuesdays, product and tech. Wednesdays, it's growth. Thursdays, it's fundraising. Second Friday of the month, it's UK startup law. And third Friday of the month, it's UK startup finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. And you can RSVP, like I said, via our website to any of them. And actually, once you're there, why not join our WhatsApp community? There's a WhatsApp icon at the top and bottom of the page. You can join us via that. And it's a few founders, investors, and operators that are part of it. Now, without further ado, we'll go to a question that was sent in to us. And this is from a green infrastructure tech founder. They're based in Glasgow. He's seed stage, used to be a civil engineer. And he says, we're developing a platform for eco-friendly building materials and need to engage with corporate VCs. What are the critical factors to consider when negotiating strategic partnerships with corporates that could also be suppliers or buyers? And how do we protect our intellectual property? That's an interesting one. Okay, so let's start with this one. I think we can go on to Tommy, then Richard, then Dan, please.
Yeah, good question. I think, from the sound of the question, they probably have a pretty good handle on the advantages, of a corporate VC. So, access to customer bases, distribution channels, things like that. The critical factors, I think, to think about is, how do you value what they can deliver to you beyond financial investments? So, access to, R&D resources, technical expertise. I don't know if it's relevant here, maybe manufacturing capabilities or infrastructure, any of those types of things. So, you have to decide, in conversation, negotiation, what valuation you put on that when you're deciding what equity to give them. The positives of, corporate VCs is they can often have a longer term investment horizon than, traditional VC who are just after financial returns. But, you do need to be cautious about giving too much control, as you've highlighted, around your intellectual property. And also, sometimes, their interests, given their long-term in nature, may not be what you're after as a founder. So I would say always try and balance by having other investors, so more traditional VCs or investors that are looking for financial returns. It's always good to have a balance of both on the cap table to just manage the direction of travel you're headed in with the business and thinking about longer term exits and stuff. And then, protecting intellectual property. Of course, you don't want to give them access to anything that they could potentially, steal or utilize to put you out of business effectively. So you want to be careful of, bad actors in that space. And the only real advice there is, you need legal advice. If you're going to be getting potentially, $1 million, a few million of investment, you definitely need to consider that it's going to be worth your while spending 10, 20, 30 grand, whatever it costs, and getting a good, proper lawyer in place that actually has experience in doing these corporate VC deals from the side of, the investee. So you, the one receiving the money. So all I'd say is, get good legal advice and, as much as possible, try and talk to other businesses and founders that have got corporate venture capital, particularly if the particular business that you're talking to or businesses you're talking to have done it before. If you can speak to some of the companies they've invested in already and the founders of those to see what the experience is like, I'd recommend that too. So, there's no straight line answer. I think you probably, from the way the question's phrased, probably know that. It's just weighing up the benefits versus the potential pitfalls and making sure you've got legal advice.
Thank you, Tommy. Richard, please.
Yeah, look, I think Tommy's done a really nice checklist there. Just to reiterate a couple of points, obviously once you get to a point to get your legal support to go through your agreements and contracts. But, when I've worked within companies where we're looking to partner up with a strategic partner, one of the key things is, are they aligned with our goals and objectives? And I think that's maybe stating the obvious, but sometimes we tend to get excited to rush into a potential partnership, and really they are different, and that usually starts showing cracks within the first few months of signing an agreement, or even sooner, and then it becomes problematic. So that's what I would define. Are they aligned to our goals? Once you feel they are, I think Tommy's already touched on this, do your due diligence. Is there anyone else that you can talk to? What's their reputation like, their financial stability, all of that. Then negotiate your terms, put that in a contract, get legal, make sure that you've got legal counsel to look over those contracts. I think it's pretty basic in those steps. I don't really have much more to add. And obviously, I think the obvious thing is, that they're talking to an audience that's potentially an audience that you want access to, which will help a startup like this, gain some brand awareness and market awareness.
Thank you very much, Richard. Last but not least, Dan, please.
Yeah, I think I'm going to build on what Richard said at the end of the day. I mean, for the wider audience on the podcast, unlike traditional venture capital, where the main goal is typically, financial return and an exit at the end of the day, corporate venture capital is a really great way to kind of for corporates to invest directly in the startup scale-up community for something that really aligns to inject some innovation to something that really aligns with their strategy. And that is why it is so important to make sure that your strategy and their strategy meets, and you really need to feel that chemistry and understand it. So to Richard's point here, really spend a lot of time really understanding that you're talking the same, because I'd say one of the biggest the main reasons corporate venture capital fails is that they think they're strategically aligned and they're not, and it can end up being, sadly, one of them, a really great divorce at the end of the day, because it's a lot harder to negotiate. Corporates don't revise their strategy very often, but they might take a hit on an investment that doesn't do so well in the day for a venture capital. So it's a lot more easy to get VC funding at the end of the day. As you're a marketplace, it is going to be your marketplace that is going to be where you want to build your moat, and you want to have a defensive IP. You might even want to use that as a way to generate revenue by licensing that to other marketplaces, other territories at the end of the day. So I'd get an IP audit done by an intellectual property law firm. They don't have to be a big law firm. Some of the best ones I work with just focus on intellectual property, and I can recommend some really good ones that work with startups and scale-ups at the end of the day. But really understand everything: trademarks, copyrights, trade secrets, which most people sadly don't understand, where the geographies you want to be based in, what patents they are. It's a great way to increase your valuation when you're raising, by the way, if you've got filed some IP, even if it's not gone to full grants and status at the end of the day. And having investors that are also suppliers or buyers is sometimes really good, because if they're particularly, then they often have a vested interest in being on it. Just be cautious that there's no kind of exclusivity, unless that is something, you want to make sure you've got diversified revenue streams from multiple suppliers. And if they're all investors, it can make a tricky conversation when your customer is also your shareholder at the same time. So make sure you've got a strong board with some good non-execs in place.
Thank you very much, all three of you. And these are some brilliant points there. I'm not sure if anyone mentioned it, but the only thing I would add to all this amazing stuff is go out there and speak to people. Find out if they've invested in others before, or maybe see if they have spoken to others about investing in them, and see, what their experience was. I see, and I've actually unfortunately done this myself, because you're desperate and you need to raise money yesterday. So you just go all in and don't have the ability or even the will to do the right due diligence. And you just try and get whatever you can, because, despite what people like us on, or whatever, some fancy podcast or a LinkedIn post or Medium or tweets, investors are in a position of power, unless you have made gazillions, or a few other investors, some leading ones, have already invested in you. But if that's not the case, then they are in a position of power and you're not thinking about other stuff. So my advice is find a way and see if they've already invested in others, and try to talk to them about it. And if they say we've never done this, then maybe do some more due diligence and see why have they not invested in anybody else, but they're now investing in you. Just, little things like that may go a long way. Right, we've got 14 minutes to go and quite a few questions to answer. Unfortunately, they're not my favorite questions in the world, because they're sent by people that, for whatever reason, couldn't be bothered to be here with us. So it'd be nice if you're here and interacting with our panelists. But nevertheless, this is a health and wellness platform for employee benefits in London. They're at seed stage. Their current situation is that they're seeking seed funding, but investors are requesting super voting shares and liquidation preferences. Our wellness platform for employee benefits is raising a seed round. And some investors have asked us for super voting shares alongside a 1.5 liquidation preference. I don't know why, but this This looks familiar, this question. What are the industry standards in the UK regarding super voting shares, and how should we balance investor expectations with founder control? Could we propose a 1x liquidation preference with standard voting rights to maintain founder influence? Let's go to Richard, then Dan, then Tom, please. Tommy, sorry.
My caveat here is I'm probably not the one to ask, so I might just pass to my fellow panelists, Anton, if that's all right on this one.
Yeah, so super voting shares, not something you see much in the UK. The famous example in the US is Mark Zuckerberg, who has the super voting share stock. He's got like this super voting share stock actually. And yeah, and there's a few other companies as well have it as well. I think there's some in Google, and it really gives the founders a disproportionate amount of say in terms of the amount of voting rights they have and the kind of shares and classes of shares that they have. It makes it very hard to do a hostile takeover if you've got a super voting founder with a majority at the end of the day. My advice just generally, not just in the UK and the US, is at least in the beginning, is try to keep a very vanilla, basic common stock, or have a very clear distinction on why you might have, let's say, two classes of shares, maybe one for founders, one for others. Don't overcomplicate it. If someone is coming in as an external investor and they're wanting a super voting share there and they're not part of the founding team, that is highly unusual. And I'd somewhat query why, because it does scream predatory kind of investor territory for me at the end of the day. Yes, liquidation rights can be negotiated. At the end of the day, a good investor will be good for the business and good for you. And it should be all fair and equitable, which pardon the pun. So see how that's also going to sit with the rest of your cap table at the end of the day. Creating special classes of shares for special investors is, they have their place. If you're putting the next Sequoia on there or something else, but even they're not likely to go for something like that in my view. But it all comes down to the devil in the detail. In the day, I'd take some advice. Don't bend your back over just because it's a big check, because they should be bringing a lot of clout and a lot of open doors and a lot of promises if they're wanting something so preferential.
Thank you very much, Dan. Tommy, any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think the first thing I'll answer is the very last part of that question. Can you propose a 1x liquidation preference and standard voting rights? I would say 100% that's what you should do, because it's a negotiation. So definitely put on the table the most favorable terms for yourself and work from there. So I definitely push back initially. In terms of the liquidation preference itself, like, one is pretty much the standard, certainly in terms of founder friendly terms. But 1.5x is not the worst. It's not exactly what you want, but it's not like massively uncommon. So that wouldn't be the bigger concern here. But I definitely push for one, or ask for a good explanation as to why they want 1.5x. But at the end of the day, if the business is successful, it's not really going to matter anyway. But yeah, the super voting shares, as Dan said, is super weird, to be honest. So, the only way you should accept that is certainly if you're going to have the same share. So if you need to be issued new stock, like matching shares for a founder to maintain your control, but you don't want them to get super voting shares and you not to the point where they have control or close to, full control over, what happens with the business. So definitely don't want that. And I'd really query, as Dan said, why they're after that. And I would also go and, you can either ask them to introduce you to some of the existing founders, the founders of existing portfolio companies, or go and just look them up and contact them yourselves and have a chat to them, because you do need to do your own due diligence, particularly in this case. But yeah, it is, a bit strange. And even if they did, say that you can have super voting shares as well and you maintain control, it may become problematic for you as you go to Series A and later rounds, as you're hopefully successful with the business. If new investors are coming in and just asking why these seed stage investors have so much voting control over the business, like, that might actually be problematic for you as you go forward, if you're just ignoring all the other stuff about potentially these investors trying to take control of the business or turf you out. Like, it might actually be an issue when it comes to later funding rounds. So yeah, the big bigger thing to negotiate here is the voting shares, and just trying to get that out and just give them standard shares basically.
And if I could just come in on Tommy's comment here, Anton, and say, also think how this fits with your exit strategy. Super voting shares are something you tend to see in companies who's very got a North Star goal of an IPO at the end of the day. So it doesn't make a big deal that Google or Alphabet, for instance, which I take case in points, have super voting shares. But when it comes to kind of an exit, it makes it very hard to exit when you've got someone there who's going to be an awkward, who doesn't want to sell their shares at the end of the day. So if your goal is, like most startups, to help sell up in 7 or 8 years, and then you can probably do this position. If you've got an investor on the board with super voting shares, that is going to put off people wanting to acquire you in the future.
Thank you very much. And that was going to be my main input here, that unfortunately, first and foremost, I'm seeing this happen a bit more than we would like to. I think it was Dan that mentioned earlier that this isn't common, at least in the UK. But unfortunately, I'm hearing a lot more people talk about this, both liquidation, but also super votes. There's only one thing to bear in mind, that is going to be a barrier when dealing with other people on the cap table today, or others that you may want tomorrow, or perhaps an exit that you may seek at some point. So that is something to bear in mind. Whilst we don't give legal advice here, personally, I think one's got to make a decision. Is this the only opportunity you have to bring that money into your business? And if this is going to be make or break, personally, I would probably choose a way to make my business. But if there's nothing else, then you have to sometimes swallow deals that are actually not really favorable either, because you got to keep the lights on and get your company to the next stage. So it is not easy, but definitely do some research. And Tommy mentioned that last, I think, in terms of reaching out to people that they've already invested in, and just see what their story is. Tommy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just firstly to say, because I didn't say, congratulations to the founders of this business. It's tough enough to even get one term sheet in the first place, so congratulations on getting to that stage. But I would say, the fact that you've managed to get a term sheet, typically if you've got like a perfectly founder friendly one, it's maybe not great practice to go and shop it around too much, but I would go out and try and see if you can generate other interest from investors as well to actually help your bargaining position on this. So if you can, I'll try and approach more investors or get connected with them and say, look, this is what we've been presented with. If you're interested, we'd like to see a term sheet from you. So I wouldn't be shy about doing that if they're asking for super voting shares.
Yeah, I've had that done right before, actually. Good point, Tom, and thank you very much. Right, we've got 4 minutes, so I think we've got about a minute each to go on to the next question. Where is it? Okay. Green Building Tech founder, based in Manchester, seed stage, an architect. Hang on, I'm looking at your LinkedIn profile, and you've just recently finished architecture school. Okay, fair enough. Our startup develops software for builders to model eco-friendly buildings. The challenge is convincing investors that construction firms will adopt this new technology. What proof points should I gather from early adopters to build credibility, and how do I quantify the potential savings to the construction industry? Oh man, I wish I'd put this question earlier. All right, let's do a quick one. Let's start with Dan, then Tommy, then Richard, please.
So I'm a big believer in don't spend too much time trying to educate your investors. Investors really don't like to be educated, to convince them that this is something that's going to be successful. I guess base it on the fact, don't equally so try and convince them that something that doesn't exist as a solution. So what you need to do is do your research, find the stats out, go out, whether it be old school with a clipboard and say these are 200 people that want to buy this kind of products, and then take it to the investor. Really go old school in the day. Show there's a demand for this, but don't try and convince an investor if the market isn't there, because you'll get caught out of it in the end. Seems like eco-friendly construction is hot at the moment.
Thanks, Dan. I can't remember. Did we say Richard or Tommy? Go on, Tommy.
Yeah, I think like Dan's kind of nailed it there. Really, I just go out and try and get interest, try and do some market research. But even if you can spin up like a very basic, website that's kind of like an MVP that shows how it would function and explains it, and just show that you get some traction if you actually had the investment to build the platform. And as I said in answer to one of the other questions already, there's so many coding agents out there now. Like, I've played around with them and I can't code at all. It's so easy to just build stuff from scratch with natural language. So I'd actually start exploring some of the coding agents out there and seeing if you could just even put together not a fully functioning MVP, but something that's enough that you can test the idea even better whenever you're going out and talking to people, and then try and show that there is market interest for a product.
Yeah,
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks. And to follow up on what's being said, look, I come from the construction industry, and if there's founders in the room listening, I'd be happy to spend a little bit more time on this, because there's a lot to unpack here. Is there a need, which has been touched on before? As far as what my experience says, a lot of these builders will build to a minimum. There are regulations already in place for builders to meet certain standards, to environmental standards and classes of their ratings of buildings. So a lot of these builders are going to do what's required already. So what is this software actually achieving? Is it, I'm just going to make this up, is it taking, getting to the standard or beyond? So then they can be seen to be doing something and market their buildings at a higher level. We are above the standard, this sort of thing. So that the information's not quite there in the question, but that's certainly what I'd be looking at. And as has been said, not to convince, I think it was Dan that said, not to convince investors, you need proof of concept. The proof's in the pudding, as the saying goes. So if you really believe in this, I would be getting a builder, use them as a case study, give it to them for free, get them to use it, get their feedback, and have that as a proof of concept. So look, this builder builds X amount of buildings, has used it, has said this, it's saved them this, it's enabled them to achieve beyond the minimum standard of green building, environmental building, and save them money, or whatever the other value props are. But it's limited information that's here, but having a proof of concept rather than convincing the investor, you walk in with a case study. And it's the same, treat it like a SaaS product. Get a corporate on board to use it, give you feedback, you make it iterations, and then you can go into an investment conversation. So that we've got XYZ company or companies, you might get one or two using it and giving you the feedback and showing the iterations that you've made based on their feedback and improving the product. But definitely get a customer involved. And if that means you have to work with them free of charge for a period of time, then that's so be it.
Thank you very much, Richard. I think it was Kudra in the chat who's mentioned a few companies that are already in the market and doing this quite well. Personally, and this is just to touch and kind of piggyback on what our three panelists have said, two things worth doing here. Number one is to speak to people that are already doing this well in the industry. Number two, go and speak to people that, for whatever reason, are not happy with what these others are doing in the industry, because that's what you want. You want to be able to do something that somebody's not doing out there. If you're doing the exact same thing and you've got no USP, then you've got nothing left. So focus on that. Go out there, as it was said here, either get people to use this if you can build it, and if you don't have the money or the ability, then get enough people that will say, we'll pay you XYZ amount of money when you've built this. We are now 2 minutes over the line, so I guess our team needs to leave. But before you do, gentlemen, have you got time for some quick parting words? Let's start with Richard, who joined us first, then Dan, then Tommy, please.
Look, I'll just say, Anton, thanks for having me. In a lot of the founders' questions today, there seems to be a strong need to still go out and test what they test their product or their solution as to what they're trying to solve a customer problem. And I would just say, go out and talk to as many customers as possible and help develop proof of concept. So it's a lot easier. Well, I'm not going to say getting funding is easy, but it makes you more investable as a founder.
Here, thank you very much for that, Richard. Dan?
Yeah, that's sound advice really at the end of the day. I think that and product market fits are really important. Everything that came up today. So really understand that you haven't got a solution to a problem that maybe doesn't exist, or the market's too small for, or the market's really hard to enter at the end of the day. And I guess the other areas obviously covers kind of legals and governance really. So trust me, an accountant and a good lawyer is possibly one of the best investments you can put in your startup. Yes, it's a cost, but they can trust me, it's not a bigger cost than some of the holes you can get into if you don't use them at the end of the day. So find it, don't have to be anyone fancy. Find a nice, good IP lawyer and a good kind of startup scale-up kind of lawyer, accountant, and they will usually provide good counsel generally on your journey, as well as doing all the books and the formalities as well.
Here. And we have 2 monthly sessions, one on UK startup law, the second Friday of each month, and one on startup finances, UK finances, that is, the third Friday of each month. Last but not least, Tommy, please.
Yeah, so just to, we've had a couple of people asking about, dealing with investors. So I'd say, whenever you are negotiating term sheets and you're at that stage, you need to do your own due diligence on the investor. So make sure you're asking them to connect you with the founders from some of their portfolio companies, and not just the ones that are doing well, but the ones that have maybe failed. And even yourself proactively look and maybe select 1 or 2 that you'd like to and say, I want to speak to these 2. So they're not just cherry picking the ones they want you to speak to. And even if you feel a little bit awkward doing that, maybe if they're being difficult about it, you still got to push through, because it'll be so much more worse and so much awkward if you end up with the wrong investor or a bad investor on your cap table, because you're going to be dealing with them for a long time. And other than that, just thanks to Pranav for actually coming up and asking the question. I know not everyone can make it, but if you are able to come up on the mic, it's so much better for us if we can dive a bit deeper into stuff by actually asking you questions rather than just reading them off the chat, so we get a better understanding. So if you can in future come up and ask the question in person, that'd be great. Thanks.
Here. Well, huge thanks to you 3 gentlemen for your great advice and your time today. Obviously, thank you to everyone that tuned in. Those that did it via the live streams, you may want to join us directly here on Microsoft Teams next time. It's audio only, which means you don't need to do much work in prepping and getting your hair done to look good in the video, because it's audio only. Anyway, the idea is quite simple. Startups need to put in way more work to get where they need to be. And to do that, we've got 6 regular events helping you to do that. On Mondays, it's talent. Tuesdays, product and tech. Wednesdays, growth. Thursdays, fundraising. Second Friday of the month, UK startup law. Third Friday of the month, UK startup finances. They're all from 12 to 1 p.m. UK time. You can RSVP to any of them via our site, startuptoscaleup.club. Actually, when you're there, you might want to join our WhatsApp community if you're based in the UK, that is. There's a WhatsApp icon at the top and bottom of our site. If you click on that, you'll be able to join one of the groups where we have founders, investors, and operators, hopefully trying to build a peer-to-peer safe network for you to speak with each other and engage with each other. As far as my parting words are concerned, just remember the startup journey can be both exciting and challenging. So try to have some fun in the meantime and be kind to yourself and everyone else. Otherwise, huge thanks again. Have a great upcoming weekend. God bless you all. And talk on Monday for Startup Talent. Bye for now.